I'd like to say good evening to everyone and welcome. We're glad to see you here and like to extend a warm welcome to a few folks here, namely Dr. Gloria White-Hammond, Dean Himpton and his wife. Glad to see you here. And the faculty, the Alumni Council, and friends from all around, those of us who are gathered here at Emerson Chapel. We also, to those who are tuned in to us that are be participating in their listening capacity through the wonders of technology with the advent of the streaming live video. So we're looking to have their company too, even though we won't be able to see them. So we want to extend that warm welcome to them. I'm Sam Nixon, currently serving as the chairperson of the Harvard Divinity School Alumni Council for 2012-2013. And I want you to know that I am very pleased that you are part of a historic beginning. This is the first in our series of what we're calling the Divinity Dialogues, and something that the Alumni Council is hoping that will become a tradition of an opportunity for our alums to actually share their story of what is happening in their lives after HDS. So there is life after HDS, right? But this is our opportunity to share with each other, to share with the HDS students, as well as the university as a whole. So it's an opportunity to hear those stories there. And we're looking forward to you as you joining us in the Divinity Dialogues. Now, this setting is one of the special settings, as many of you all here know. It's one of the, I guess I'd characterize it as one of the special places on campus in terms of holding such conversations, because many of you are aware that dialogues took place in this room over many years, and there's been much conversation that has happened here. And notably among those, of course, Ralph Waldo Emerson's address at the Divinity School just a few years ago in 1838. So this is an excellent place to begin our Divinity Dialogues as we look forward to the series. And along that line, it leads us to also be aware of leading into our theme that the Alumni Council has adopted for this year. And that theme that we're operating is excellence in leading, faithful in service, and global in giving. And that theme is our guidelines as we call on all of our alums to take the opportunity to look at how you have the occasion to give excellent leadership in whatever area that you're in. And whether it ranges from leading from an organizational piece to the leadership that you provide even in your own home, but leadership. Not just the standard leadership, but leadership that excels in its own way. It makes a difference in the lives that it touches. That excellence in leading is a context for the faithfulness in service. No good leader does well who is not willing to serve, and service is integral to leadership. Here at the Divinity School, it's one of the things that we remember well, that we learn from those who have come along in giving service to what they've done to be in positions of leadership. And that serves us well in the wider community and indeed around the globe. So faithfulness and service is a very integral part. And then, of course, global in giving. You can't lead and serve without being willing to give. And giving is not just in terms of material ways, but your time and talent. And so all of our alum are called on to remember that in some way, somehow, some form, that giving should be recognized in where they are serving and providing that leadership. So the theme is calling all of us to remember excellence in leading, faithful in service, and global in giving. And tonight we have one of those alums who is in a very good position to highlight all three of those characteristics there. Tonight we're privileged, if you will, to have amongst us the speaker who is serving as co-pastor of the Bethel AME church right here in Boston. She and her husband, Dr. White-Hammond, have been serving that community well and and demonstrating the leadership, service, and giving with the congregation there. She's also not only a good pastor, but she's also a executive director of My Sister's Keeper, and she will be hearing more about that dynamic organization as she shares with us. She's a retired pediatrician from the South End Community Health Center, so she's been serving in areas of health. For 3 decades, she has served the communities both locally and globally. She has demonstrated through her own work how a good model is and an excellent model is in service to the people that she gives that service to. She's worked extensively in some of Boston's most challenged parts of the city, and she's made numerous trips to war-torn Sudan. We know the context of that area, so she's very well acquainted with helping to deliver service and giving in that section, and we'll hear some of that tonight. Not only there in Sudan and Darfur, but also in Chad. And some of the initiatives that she started have been in those contexts where the need has been great. Her life's work was focused particularly on the empowerment of women and the promotion of sustainable peace. So she is a woman of peace, and we're glad to hear that. Dr. Gloria White-Hammond is a graduate of Boston University, Tufts University School of Medicine, and here at Harvard Divinity School. She's a member of the boards of Brigham and Women's Hospital, Save Darfur Coalition, and Tufts University. That's her formal part. I'll just say a note that I also know Dr. Gloria White-Hammond through the stages that she's grown, and she and her family have been very dear friends, and we've seen how she's blessed many through her life's work. So we take the occasion tonight to ask if she would share in her own special way what it is to have come through HDS and the impact it's had in terms of leadership, service, and giving. Won't you help me warmly greet Dr. Gloria White-Hammond as our first speaker.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It really is a privilege for me to be with you all today and to see so many of my good friends from my days here at HDS, and some before and some after. Let me begin by certainly thanking Sam for extending this invitation, and then Michael and Nancy and Amy, who can track a sister down and stay in her case. I gave them early, and I gave them full permission to harass me, and so they have done that. They have done that well. I also want to thank a very special friend who's here this afternoon, and that's my good friend Arlay, who is currently a student at the Divinity School. But what's so significant about Arlay being here is for all the 3 years that I was at the Divinity School, Arlay was my prayer partner. We agreed to start praying in September. I knew I didn't have time to pray, but I learned you can't get through Harvard Divinity School without somebody praying for you. And so she really saw me through and has been such a good friend and has watched this evolution over the years. And so I'm going to talk about the work that I've done, especially since my time here at Harvard Divinity School. And you should recognize that when I came here, I was known for being extremely shy. I very rarely spoke in class. It was such a culture shock for me because it had been such a long time since I'd been in school. The students were familiar with books that hadn't even been written when I was an undergraduate. And so I was just a really shy person. And I will say that over the last, especially over the last 10 years, the last 11 years, I have become fierce. And so I started out as a fairly well-behaved woman, and now I am a fierce, very poorly behaved woman, and I'm very proud of it. Let me begin by acquainting you with this woman, who of course is no stranger to us. This is a woman, Harriet Tubman. And we certainly know so much about Harriet Tubman because of her anti-slavery work. And she has become a real champion for me. And it's merely because of this work with slavery and trafficking that I took on this poorly behaved woman to become myself. Many of us have thought that slavery was one of those things that used to happen a long time ago, and indeed that is not at all the case. Trafficking is very much alive and well on the planet today. Some 10 to 30 million people are enslaved, so it's not long ago, nor is it far away. In the United States, we have some 14,500 to 17,500 human beings who are trafficked annually in the United States. So when I began this work, those were pretty much foreign data for me. But this is what modern day slavery looks like. Predominantly women, greater than 70% of current slaves, and half of them are children. That's very different from what it was like once upon a time when my ancestors were slaves. It's big business. $32 billion generated annually. And this is what's amazing. It's not just from those countries over there that don't know any better. Half of that is generated from industrialized countries. Life is cheap. The average price of a slave now is something like $90. That was relatively expensive compared to what I encountered in South Sudan in July of 2001. I had been invited to travel to South Sudan under the auspices of a group called Christian Solidarity International. They were involved in a very elaborate underground railroad to free people who were enslaved during what was at that time the civil war between northern Sudan and South Sudan. And for the cost of essentially $33 a person, you too could have purchased the freedom of this woman. I was very much ignorant when I was invited to travel to South Sudan to bear witness to this slave trade. As a matter of fact, I was so ignorant that Our Lady and I were praying that my husband would get a totally different revelation. He thought it would be a great idea. I thought it was just one of the stupidest ideas that he had had in a long time. We didn't even know where the passports were. So being dutiful Christians, we were in agreement that my husband would see the light. We were also invited by another subsequent alum of the Div School, Liz Walker, who at the time was a broadcast journalist in the Boston area, and she had been invited to do a story on this slavery. So she invited us to go along as her pastors, and again, at some point I decided to go because what good girlfriend would let her good girlfriend go off to a war zone without having her back? So between wanting to keep Liz's back and wanting to at least be there when my husband took his last gasping breath, I went off to Sudan, and at that point it was known as both Sudan. This, of course, is the continent of Africa, and you certainly see Sudan, which is in the eastern part of Sudan, of Africa. It is the largest country on the continent of Africa. Now, of course, that there are two separate countries, that is no longer the case. Very much a country that's been at conflict with itself, and I won't go into the details of the political strife, but shall we say that in 1956, Sudan, like many countries in the continent of Africa, became independent. It was primarily ruled by England and Egypt as the Anglo-Egyptian condominium. And in 1956, when it became independent, it subsequently became a country that, for the most part, remained at war against itself. A number of civil wars, the two that I've highlighted there between 55 and 72, and then between 1983 and 2005, in which the northern government, with the government is primarily sitting in Khartoum, which is in northern Sudan, was really in opposition to the Southerners, who are, again, you can see there in South Sudan. As a result of that conflict, some 2 million people were killed, 4 million people displaced, including the young men that we often identify as the Lost Boys. But what we don't know is how many people were enslaved as a result of that conflict. And what would typically happen is that people who identified with the northern government would go into the southern villages where they would typically kill men summarily, but sometimes take women and children into the northern part of Sudan, where they were then sold into slavery. In 2005, the North and South began to negotiate a peace agreement, and then in 2011, South Sudan became fully independent. It was this scene that I saw on July 4th, 2001. That was my first day inside South Sudan. And again, for the most part, I was fairly ignorant about what I would find. They certainly talked about slavery, just had no idea what that would involve. But when I remember looking out on this crowd, and what would happen is that the local people would partner with sympathetic Arabs, for the most part, who would then go into the villages and identify people from their particular region and either abduct them from their master or actually pay for them and then bring them back to their villages, usually in hundreds and sometimes in groups of 1,000. This was a very controversial practice, but I will, as I go on, I'll tell you what I heard from the people who were actually involved with that. So this is the scene that I saw on day one. And what I had not realized was the extent to which so many of these returning slaves were actually women. For the most part, 95% of them were women and their children. It made sense, but at the time I just didn't realize that. And over and over, I heard stories of unconscionable abuse that women experienced. Let me just, now, am I moving this or? Okay. All right. This woman that you see here is one of the women who's particularly struck me. You'll see the scarring over her chest, and this is certainly a very a common scar that you'll see in South Sudan. We talk about these are keloids, so it's a very thick scarring that people experience subsequent to an injury. The scarring that you see on her chest was from injuries that she sustained when she attempted to resist being raped by her captors. The child off to her left is her birth child. The child off to her right is one that she adopted because this child's mother died from her injuries. And over again, we heard stories of unconscionable abuse. The next slide that you'll see, and I'm going to ask you to just flash that very quickly. This young boy was one that I had spied in a crowd of several hundred returning slaves. And I had certainly seen deformities in children before, so I made the assumption that he was in fact a victim of a congenital deformity. When I spoke with his mother, in fact, that was not the case. This young boy had been charged to do what many young boys are charged to do, which is to keep the cattle or goats. Because he lost a cow, his master was so angry with him that he took an axe and chopped the boy's nose off. And it is a very difficult picture to see, but I show people because I want them to understand that this is the face of genocide up close and personal. And when we get beyond the objectivity of the numbers and the statistics, this is what it looks like. So I'm going to ask you to just flash back to that slide again. And this axe is one that the community found to give him, so that this is what the master used to chop off this boy's nose. Next slide. Thank you. So this, for me, begged a critical question because, again, I am by nature a very shy person. I am by nature someone who's pretty much lived my life inside the box. From an early age, I colored inside the lines. And, but for me to take on this kind of a work, again, was controversial because one of the criticisms was that that this in its own way could be fostering its own economic enterprise. And so it was a real challenge for me to know that I would then be taking on something that would subject me to controversy. But I spoke with this woman, and I said to her that there were many people in America who were critical of this slave redemption work. And I wondered what she would say. And she said to me, she said, "You go back and tell the American people that I said thank you for buying my freedom. I have suffered in the North, and certainly life in the South will be very difficult as well." But she said, and this she cupped the soil, and she said, "But at least I'll be in a place where the soil is the color of my own skin, at least I will be with my own people. And for me, that was really an impetus to do something. And in many ways, I understood that I had a capacity to do for someone else what had not been done for my ancestors 400 years earlier. And so certainly as a person of African descent and a descendant of slaves, I had to do something. One of the things that I've come to realize, and this is sort of leadership lesson number one, is that that our calling is not so much to pursue careers with all that's implied in that. It really is about answering a calling. And sometimes when we answer callings, it takes us into very difficult and uncomfortable places. But I understood a long time ago that it wasn't about a career in medicine, it was about a calling to a ministry of healing, which in many ways has given me so much more latitude to take on the hard work and to do the hard things, because it's not about me and my career, it's about service and facilitating healing. And so there were good girlfriends, and what I've learned along the way is that a good girlfriend is worth way more than her weight in gold. And so you need to have some good, big girlfriends, right? And so this group of us came together to launch this initiative that we called My Sister's Keeper. And there are three of us, two others who are now Divinity School alums. This other person, Liz Walker, is also a Divinity School alum. And what's remarkable about this group of women, is poorly behaved women, is that none of us were trained to do any of this. So we all have other careers. Melinda, let's see here, I'm going back here, let me go back. Melinda, the second person, is an attorney, and she came to the Divinity School, and now she's a preacher in New York. The other woman who's next to her is Cynthia Bell, and she's a public health specialist and has done a lot of work with strategic planning. One of the other women is a philanthropist and heads up one of the largest philanthropic foundations in New England. But none of us knew how to do this. But we saw a cause, and we became gutsy girls and realized that we could do something to handle the situation. And so that's who we are, and that's what we do. We decided that we would be our sisters' keepers. And the next slide. So our mission is this. We partner with resourceful and resilient Sudanese women and girls living in Sudan and throughout the diaspora as they reclaim their lives and rebuild their communities. And this woman, Sarah, is a real champion for me. A couple of years ago, Hillary gave her the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award. We were on our way to an area in northern Sudan. Here you welcome me, but I can tell you in northern Sudan, Bashir knows my name and does not think I'm as cool as you all do. I was scheduled to take a trip into Sudan and had gotten a visa and to travel, and then 2 weeks before, his special assistant personally rescinded my visa so that I could not travel into northern Sudan, but I ain't scared. And again, what's remarkable is that this is not the woman who came here, but this is the woman who, having amassed all that you had to share with me, give me a vision of what was possible, this is who I am today. So much of our work is at least initially focused on development, and one of the things that we found when we went to South Sudan was just the dreams and aspirations of so many young girls. This is a country where for the 92% of women are illiterate. And yet we had young girls who wanted to be able to go to school because, like your daughters and mine, they had big dreams, they had big visions. And so we committed to supporting those girls. Next slide. The first thing that the community asked us to do was to build a school. We had never built a school before. We don't even build a school over here, much less build a school over there. And when we agreed to do that, we hired a woman to be our construction person. That just doesn't happen in South Sudan. And when she came into the village, she was met by an older gentleman who said that I understand that you're here to build a school. And she said, yes, we're going to do that. And he scoffed at her and he said, well, if you do that, we will celebrate you throughout all of Sudan. And if you fail, we will defame your name forever, everywhere. So that's why we built a school. And it's just very exciting now. This school now provides learning for 525 girls, K1 through 8. Many people recognized it was a very difficult promise. Charlene Hunter-Gault, many of you may know that she's a reporter formerly with CNN and used to be with McNeil-Lehrer Report, traveled with us and came back and filed a report on NPR about how difficult this promise was to keep. But we kept our promise. And one of the things that I've learned in terms of leadership is when you make a commitment, you have to follow through. So we are slow to make a commitment. We will drag it out over a period of time, but once we make a promise, people will tell you in Sudan and South Sudan that we keep a promise. And that's given us a tremendous amount of credibility to do the work that we've wanted to do. The next slide. In 2007, a young graduate student from Boston University went over to see what she could do to support us. Women said that they felt like they could do a better job of supporting their girls if they also knew how to read. And so we started an adult literacy project, but this is what school was like in the early days. This is your blackboard, is making letters in the dirt. And now in the next slide, you'll see that those women, the Women's Peace School is up and it's about, and women are beginning to read. And it's very exciting to have them share their stories about the sense of power that they feel just because they're able to read. Next slide. So our next steps are teacher training and development, and we've done some interesting work around that, piloted some projects for the USAID, and again, very much looking forward to seeing the progress in this new nation, the newest nation on the continent of Africa, the newest nation in the world. The next slide. But one of the other lessons that I've learned along the way is that development is important, schools are important, hospitals are important, but the other piece of that, there has to be some degree of advocacy. And when we went to South Sudan, we didn't really know so much of the politics until in 2005, Darfur erupted. And many of you who have known about Sudan or South Sudan have been tracking the challenges in Darfur in Western Sudan. And it was at that point that I realized that we needed to simply do more than just helping people out. It was largely the women in South Sudan who said, well, we can't begin to experience peace until there's peace all over South Sudan. So once again, Liz and I go off to Darfur, and this is in Western Sudan. And again, I hope that you've tracked some of the conflict there as well. Some now 500,000 people who've lost their lives and 2.5 to 3 million people who are displaced. That is a conflict that unfortunately continues to be ongoing. So our work in regard to Sudan is by no means over. And then the next slide, what we recognized was the same kind of stories that we had heard in South Sudan, we are hearing among women in Darfur. And much of our work there was simply to tell the story. Tell us what your experience is like. Over 5 days, we met with some 60 women, 2/3 of whom reported having been raped, really gang raped. And for me, that was another epiphany experience, because what I came to recognize is so often we want to help because it's those people over there. What I then came back with a new set of eyes is recognizing that violence against women is like a cancer, and it continues to grow not only in Sudan, not only in South Sudan, but there seems to be an increasing degree of violence against women that is operating without impunity. And so what happens in camps in Darfur is just as egregious as what happens in domestic violence cases in Cambridge or bride burnings in India, or young girls who want to go to school in Pakistan and on a bus and get shot in the head. It's all about violence against women, and it is time for we who love women and care about women to stand up and say, no, no more. And that for me was an awakening that, yes, I should have, but it was an awakening that I have come to as I've taken on this work. And so I'm looking for well-meaning women and well-meaning men who will just stand up and put our hands on our hips and bob our heads and roll our eyes and say, we're not doing that anymore. That is not acceptable. Next slide. One of the other critical lessons that I've learned in terms of advocacy is the importance of media. Many people wonder, how has this Saved Our Four movement gotten going? Because it's another African country with another conflict. And so they are amazed that there is so much information now circulating about this little country or this issue in Africa. And I would say that there are a number of things that have come together. One, in 1994, Don Cheadle starred in Hotel Rwanda. Many students saw that movie and decided that they would not allow genocide to happen on their watch. And so it was the event was in 1994, but the movie came out in 2004, 2005. One of the other critical pieces to this is CNN and the fact that the world is ever so much smaller than it used to be. So everybody who wants to move into the 21st century, the 22nd century, has to have a global agenda. I, for the most part, have been tethered here in the US, but this has really underscored for me the fact that the world is altogether smaller, and we certainly need to have a global agenda. One of the things that's very critical is the day when America could simply tell the rest of the world what they needed to do to deal with their issues. It has come and it is gone. It really requires a much more global understanding and much more collegiality and collaboration. And that's one of the unique features about this movement, is that it is, in many ways, it's been inter-everything, intergenerational, interracial, interfaith, and international. And that has been one of the critical pieces that I believe has really informed the birth of this movement and the success of this movement. And the next slide. Our second initiative then really capitalizes on this peace-building effort by women, Sisterhood for Peace. And what this does is bring diverse women together to collaborate across differences. When we first started to launch this initiative, I went to some men with whom I'd been working on the Sudan issue and said, can you imagine bringing people together to really collaborate, so it wouldn't just be the Darfuris working on Darfur, the Southerners working on the South, but everybody working together. And this gentleman said, you know, Gloria, I don't think it can happen. He said, even the men, even the Darfur men, they can't seem to get together. And I said, well, what about women? And he paused and he said, you know, I think you have something there. So what's been very exciting for us is to really is to create the possibility for women and now men even working across difference. And men will tell you that what got them working across difference was seeing the extent to which women were able to do that. One of the quotes that I especially love by Desmond Tutu, he says, I've long called for a revolution based on women, that it's the last best hope to restore love and compassion and peace to the planet. And so what I've come to arrive at, I didn't come here as a feminist, but I have arrived at the point where I think Desmond Tutu is right. And while I'm not convinced that we can do better, I am confident that we cannot do worse. And so as the world begins to embrace women's ways of working. And I know there are outliers, right? But as the world begins to embrace women's ways of working and the possibility of transcending difference, honoring difference, but not allowing difference to keep us apart, I believe that there's hope for the planet. And this is what we see illustrated in these slides. And these are women from 4 different regions in Sudan and South Sudan who for generations have been pitted across differences in race and geography and ethnicity and tribes, but working together because they have a common vision for a peace throughout both Sudan and South Sudan. In this next slide, this is a conference that we held in July of 2010. And what's remarkable is that we have women from every region between Sudan and South Sudan. And again, you have to understand just how deep the divide was. For many of these women, it's the first time that they've been in the same space with someone from a different part of the country. But we were even able to bring women from refugee camps in Chad, and it really was a transformative experience, not only for the women who were there, but also for Sudanese who had never seen anything like that before. And like I said, the sisters get it sometimes in a way that at least this gentleman said the brothers did not. Next slide. So this is really the question that I challenge all of us here at the Divinity School. Where is your Sudan? Where is that place that takes you out of your comfort zone, really causes you to strike out and to do something that you can't even begin to imagine, because it's not about us and it's not about the comfort, but it's about rising to the capacity where we really can make a difference. And so that's my question for you, is where is your Sudan? For me, my Sudan really was some 9,000 miles away. But your Sudan could be right here in Boston. And for those of you who have small children, your Sudan is probably in the bedroom next to yours. But to find that place that is so uncomfortable and so difficult that you have to stretch beyond yourself in order to make the difference. And then the second question is, who's going to be your sister's keeper? When we look around the planet and see the challenges that so many women encounter on this day, International Day of the Girl, right? Who's going to be our sister's keeper? And if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Next slide. So this is I'm at an interesting juncture now, because the issue that took me abroad in many ways seems to be the issue that is now tethering me here, and to begin to look at human trafficking here in Massachusetts, the state that has the largest number of people who are trafficked is here in Massachusetts. And so one of my questions now is, what do I begin to do about human trafficking? And for those of you who share that interest, I would encourage you to look at CNN, The Freedom Project. That's been on now for the last year, and they're doing some amazing work with regard to trafficking. So I'm open. All I know is that I'm just not a well-behaved woman. In the next slide, and what can you do on Sudan and South Sudan? And those are certainly the things that we'd encourage you to do. There is still much, much work that needs to happen with regard to this country. And then next slide. And so this has become my mantra. I don't know if you know the origins of this well-behaved women rarely make history, but Laura Thatcher Ulrich is a historian who several years ago much of her work is focused on, quote, ordinary women. And she found that when she was looking at ordinary Puritan women's lives, that if she looked in the newspaper, she usually found out about women who had come up against the status quo, who were notorious women. But to find out about the regular women, she had to mind the obituaries. And so her comment was that the well-behaved women, they're figured in the obituaries, but they rarely make history. Well, I am a very poorly behaved woman, and I'm very proud of it, and I'm poised to make history. Thank you.